With RMCs, the idea creeps in their mind sometimes. Is the RMC an unnecessary middleman?
That's something I've grappled with since I started over 30 years ago. It started with basically you charged fees for all the services that you did. And then 70s, 80s-ish, there started to be the opportunity for referrals.
What does pricing look like in this industry and why is it set up this way?
Powered by NEI Global Relocation. This is Relocation Leader, the podcast where we help advanced professionals in the world of global mobility. Now, here's your host, Zac Turbes.
Welcome to another episode of Relocation Leader. I'm your host, Zac Turbes, and today we have the one, the only, Michelle Moore, the CEO and President of NEI Global Relocation. And thank you for coming on, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Zac, for having me. It's always a pleasure.
How was the travel?
It was a very short commute today.
Nice. So we have a very special episode today. This is the 40th episode. Also, this is our 40th year in business.
I'm excited to realize I did not know it was the 40th episode of the Relocation Leader podcast. Congratulations to you and your team. That is a big milestone in and of itself, just like NEI's 40 years in business. That doesn't come easy. I'm going to ask you a question. What has been your greatest learning since you started the podcast to today?
Oh, man. I think that, the thing that I've enjoyed the most is being able to meet a ton of service partners, finding out what they do, how they deliver service, and just sort of their own unique perspectives on the relocation industry as a whole, So it's kind of neat to see the network and the web of support that we build for our clients and how sort of we all just work together to deliver on what we say we're going to deliver on.
It does take an amazing partnership to do that. And I'm glad I got to ask you a question because we could flip the tables on you that I've been teasing you about for a while for you to be on the other side of the interview questions.
Yeah. I'm glad you did too. All right. So I have a few questions about our 40 years, but then we're going to get into a range of different issues that I know plenty of people want to hear from, and especially from you. So first one, so when you look at NEI over the last 40 years, kind of what has changed and what hasn't changed?
I'm going to start with the what hasn't changed first, because with that, I think it's really important that our culture, our values, our love of our fantastic clients, that hasn't changed from where we started to where we're at today. That has all been really consistent. And so with that, our employees get to enjoy what they do. They understand their culture. They're working for some incredible people with our clients around the world that are doing awesome things, from anything in the pharmaceutical, in the manufacturing space, tech space. They get to experience it all. So that is awesome. And that hasn't changed over our history. When I think of what has changed, I remember back when I started, it was such a huge deal when there was a new fax machine and how many fax machines could be on each floor. And now when I think about the people that are coming in to join us, I don't think any of them have ever used a fax machine. Some of them may not have heard of a fax machine. And it's all about technology and the system. And where we used to have big files when I started over 30 years ago, kind of stood the test of how thick the file was. That's now all digitalized, and how few documents we really have in the process to get someone moved from their origin to their new location. And even around the world, people may feel like it's a number of documents, and it's a small handful and nowhere in comparison to what it used to be. So that still is something that I just think of how far the innovation we've come. But in the immigration space, there's still a few too many documents. We'd like to see some of the governments reduce some of that. Even in the home sale process, there's still a lot of documents. It would be nice to help reduce those. But we have great things now to support that with remote notaries that do even the notarization of documents remotely, that it can make it a very streamlined process, but there's still some opportunities there.
So one of the questions we often get and is talked about frequently is about pricing. So
It always comes up.
elephant in the room, I'm curious with RMCs, and I know a lot of companies, like they don't actually think this, but the idea creeps in their mind sometimes. Is the RMC an unnecessary middleman? Can you explain a little bit more from the RMC perspective and just a general relocation overview of what does pricing look like in this industry and why is it set up this way?
Zac, that's a very interesting question. That's something I've grappled with since I started over 30 years ago. So 40 plus years ago, it started with basically you charged fees for all the services that you did. And then 70s, 80s-ish, there started to be the opportunity for referrals where when the commissions were paid to the real estate agent, if your RMC was a real estate broker, which we all are today, you collected a portion of that referral for placing the business. That then could reduce the cost to the corporate client when the RMC collected that, and then allow for the RMC not to charge as high a fees to cover their costs. And in today's world, with how prices have increased on homes, allow you to provide an incentive or a credit to the company, all within compliance of RESPA, and work through that. So our pricing model has gotten a little convoluted with all the service partner lines offering as part of their overhead some of an opportunity when the RMC brings those service partners business for them to pay a referral for being brought the business. So with that to your client, then we work very transparently. We show them what the costs are and disclose that we are getting a referral, and that helps reduce the costs that you are paying. So procurement doesn't always get on board with that because they don't understand when they're trying to compare pricing how the models can look so different. So we try and educate with that. We try and explain to understand how the referrals make up probably over half of the income when considering the real estate referral of what goes into covering the expenses of a move for a client.
From your perspective, is this inflating prices having the RMC involved, or is it keeping it down then?
No, it's keeping it down.
Yeah.
A lot of the RMC prices have not changed since I've been at NEI. So we're talking, they're going back 30 years of what you might be charging for expense administration or some of the other a la carte fees, because those referrals are naturally gravitating with the cost of inflation of what's being built into the costs of the various services, because oftentimes they're a small percentage of 1% to 2% of the various costs.
What does a conversation with procurement actually sound like? When you're going back and forth and trying to explain how, pricing from this company is actually structured differently than pricing from this company, and how do you get everyone on the same page?
You really end up going down to show examples. You show the costing models to show here's a move from the origin location to the destination. You outline all the different factors and then show what the costs are. And oftentimes with their questions, you end up kind of running your model in several different ways, and then also kind of showing the variables so that you can show what it looks like with the direct costs, what it looks like, where they're going to get credits potentially, and then the fees, if any, what those will look like, and really kind of walking them through step by step so that they really feel that they understand the model that they're selecting. They feel that it's full transparency all the way through. And we might be a little bit unique in that perspective because we do outline all that, and we do want to make sure that based upon they understand how we're pricing it and what they're going through. Sometimes RFPs come in and they will tell us exactly how to price and exactly where they want to see the different types of pricing models, and then we follow along with that. But a lot of times we're doing a lot of education up front just because a lot of companies may not go through a relocation RFP frequently. And so with that, and then only having one provider in that space as compared to their core business, where they'd have a multitude of providers providing the same services or the same product, it really makes what we do very unique.
Yeah. Would you say, so, over the years, last 40 years, the way that corporations have been dealing with relocation has changed? I imagine a lot of the ones that had relocation programs were first doing them more in-house, trying to manage a lot of that stuff. And, fast forwarding to kind of now, this is creating an environment where a lot of people who are outsourcing their relocation, HR generalists are more handling relocation. So where does the RMC step in and help matters when you have this sort of transfer of expertise?
That is a huge thing because mobility managers used to, the demographic was have many years of experience. They ran a whole program. But now there's fewer companies that have that dedicated mobility space. So to your point, that generalist oftentimes is stepping in. They might have not been involved in their own relocation, just depending upon the level of their career. They may not have had exposure. And we start with the what's relocation oftentimes and work through. But that's where our client relations team does a fabulous job. They really help from that onboarding of that new contact at our client, really make sure that they understand, here's what your program is, here's how it's working. And then we also offer, is there anything that from what you're hearing needs to change within your program? We're doing that constantly throughout kind of the life cycle with our clients, is to understand, to keep them ahead of what's next. We're making recommendations all the time, but it's always great when a new person steps in from the standpoint of fresh eyes and ears for what they're hearing at the company related to their mobility space, and then any feedback that they have so that the recommendations that we're giving, we can really make sure that they align with that corporate culture.
Could you isolate like maybe one thing that most of these administrators are dealing with that is their primary pain point, and sort of how RMCs help to alleviate some of that for them?
One of the things is often when you're moving, there can be a lot of costs and expenses involved. And a lot of times they're throwing out within their company, how come you're not paying for this? How come you're not paying for that? So with that, NEI can help support what their policy is, help direct the employee to where that's covered in their policy, or if not, how they can use their relocation lump sum or allowance to cover it, and really help support how that works for them and help the employee feel good about their moving benefits versus when they go internally, the individuals may not fully understand their own policy, or if they do, sometimes it's hard to have those people coming at you all the time. We're comfortable with that. We really work to educate them up front, though, so that really helps their employees know through their moving process what to expect to help avoid some of that. But those questions still come up. And it's where's my money? How am I going to get reimbursed for that? And we can walk them through that beginning to end and save the company a lot of time.
All right. So moving on to mortgage rates. So mortgage rates have had a huge impact on the economy, on relocation. Can you explain sort of on the RMC side, on the client side, sort of what has been the effect? And maybe do you have any predictions,
The mortgage rates really have run a little bit of havoc within our industry, with rates being historically low, 2-3% several years ago, as you've mentioned. Individuals that are moving every couple of years have those 2% loans, and they're looking now, why would I want to get a 6 or 7% loan and give up what I have? This makes absolutely no sense. In a time where home prices have continued to increase, so the costs of getting into a new home are very high. So people that are being offered jobs to move are looking at, how can I do it without selling my home? And so that has really reduced what's on the market. So individuals that are maybe in their career now getting that move that they're thinking, oh, this is going to be a time to buy, all of a sudden are going out there. And because there's such low inventory in many places, the inventory prices are higher, as well as those higher mortgage rates. And then they can't find that they can't buy. So then the rental market is I know that it seems like apartment buildings are being built every day, that there's some houses for rent, but those are snatched up quickly, that it just is creating a lot of bottlenecks within the housing system for people to move, that over the course of, my tenure at NEI, I really only saw a little bit back in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe. And while we're not there now, and it's not really predicted we're going to get there with foreclosures because it's a different sort of market bottleneck with the interest rates and not really on the pricing of the loans that's driving that, it is still slowing down the impact of individuals being able or wanting to take a move and being able to find what they're looking for in housing in the new location. So there's a lot of people on the sidelines with either job offers or offers to transfer, that the housing market, due to the interest rates and then the downward effect of that, is having them press pause.
What have companies found success with in helping people, commit to, yes, I'll move?
With that, a lot of flexibility. So we are helping with different offers as far as putting creative packages together. Sometimes to get the talent there, it's no longer a perm move, but is it something that looks like a commuter package? Is it something that maybe there has been some additional benefits to help offset the cost of the mortgage interest rate differential? That's not been widespread. Companies are looking at that of, why are we mortgage rates still historically over 50 to 60 years are historically low at 6 to 7%, but convincing an individual with a 2 to 3% mortgage rate, you can't convince them.
Because it's relative to that person's experience.
It
and they're
is.
like, I literally have this home that's
Right.
2.5%. So,
and bought it at this
Yeah.
price. And although I can sell it for exponentially more, what I would look for my next step to buy, and usually we always see people want to buy up, it's going to cost me usually double that, and then the interest rate is higher. So it really is coming up with some creative packages on what is going to attract that employee, and or helping the employee. So oftentimes we're running the numbers with them as a candidate to say, this is the differential. Here's what you're being offered in the package to accept this promotion, or what you might see. So here's where it may look. And while they may not like it, sometimes seeing the actual numbers and go, okay, maybe at a few $100s a month because I'm getting this sort of raise. Okay, we're going to do it even though I hate my new interest rate and I'm going to watch for the first opportunity to refinance. We'll go ahead and sell and give up that low interest rate that they have and get into a 6 or 7% interest rate. So a lot of times it is that education and really looking at the numbers.
what do you think the threshold is to where people are going to really start picking up and they're going to say, hey, this is about as good as we can get. Let's get this moving.
I think if we could get to 5, or if people can feel like they could get
in the 4s,
4.75,
Yeah.
4.875, I think you'd start to see more activity pop on, because you also have those people that are not in the communities, not relocating, but make a big swing. All those individuals that are staying in their homes as they're retiring. Typically, we've seen a lot of people able to get into kind of that next level home as people do the downsizing. The children are out of the house. They may be finishing up their career and maybe moving to that assisted living or moving to Florida or Arizona. And now with them choosing not to give up their home or their interest rates either, that population of inventory for the housing market isn't there. So people aren't able to continue to do that step up market, and people get out of their homes to move on to the next. So I do think if we get down to at least the 5% or maybe just a hair lower, a lot of those people that have been putting off that type of step up move or the downsize move, we'll see some of that open. And I certainly think we'll see the people on the sidelines for relocation start to want to move forward with a move.
Is there anything a company should, every company has its own strategy, but what should companies be thinking about in terms of like preparation for when interest rates actually do start coming down? Like, how does that affect their own talent strategy?
And that's exactly where I was going to go. They need to have a talent strategy. And what does their business need? And is this going to drive, if interest rates change, what else is going to drive in their need for talent? And then whether that is the interest rates going down, so having more people saying, hey, I want to reactivate my benefits that maybe I chose not to use or used in a different way. I'm now ready to sell my house. What does that look like? We can help companies with that. As well as if the interest rates decide to go up, what is that going to do for their talent? And then what do we need to structure? So sometimes it's not a one size fits all, and we have to be ready for whichever way things might swing. Your plan A, your plan B, and also then having that aligned to what is a company going to need for their talent. And that evolves every year, but we're checking in with our clients at least every quarter to see what is it looking like for them so that we can make sure that we're keeping their policies positioned for their what's next.
I'm curious, your perspective, what goes into sort of choosing an RMC from almost like a matchmaking standpoint? So like you have different RMCs that have different strengths, like I've typed it in 1,000 times on ChatGPT, who's the best RMC? And one of the answers I appreciate, after it says NEI, it's one of those things where it's like, you can't just say the best because they're different, So getting more specific, how do you make sure that when you choose an RMC that there is a compatibility, between what your needs are, what your culture is, and, what maybe their capabilities are and their culture is?
Absolutely, Zach. And that's probably why our sales team does a very thorough job of not just responding or finding clients, but they really are working through where do we have that cultural match? And we have a very systematic process that Pam Jacknick and the sales team go through that really kind of ranks when we're considering working with a new prospective client or we receive an RFP, making sure, do we have a culture match? Because there are, to your point, differences where companies might just say, lowest cost provider, we don't care about service, we don't want this, and just what is the bottom line? And that's not always the best match. And so we're really looking for, when we move into that next stage and really talking with a prospect seriously or doing an RFP, looking at, what are they looking for? To your point, do services align? We offer the full gamut of services. So we can offer all services, but sometimes if a client is picking and choosing, that if they only want visa and immigration within China and they're not looking for any other pieces of the move to be handled. We may look at that and feel that without being able to support the balance of the move, that doesn't always come together well because there's things that go hand in hand. But there might be, if you have the whole piece of the move that you really can support them for getting an end, that's where we excel. We really excel where we can help the client see mobility in a holistic approach with all the benefits and services, that they are open to keeping their policies updated and fresh. They are open to allowing our team members to communicate with them and their employees and making sure things run smoothly. That's some of those things that become a good cultural match to us.
If you've built an entire company about owning the process from start to finish, that shows up in who you partner with.
Absolutely, because partnerships are really the backbone of what we do with the service partners. They are eyes and ears on the ground. They're the ones that are supporting the rental finding, the home finding, school searches, all those things that happen in so many locations. They're done by experts, and they're by the experts that we have that are fully vetted, that we are working in partnership we're also able to work with, you talked about pricing. We talked about pricing a little bit earlier. When we can drive all of our move volume there versus just one client's move volume there, we can use those volume incentives to really lower the direct costs of those services, as well as those service partners then know us. We know them. We know how we work well together. We can make sure this family has these needs. This individual has these specific nuances. We know exactly how they will take care of it because we've been there before with them and we've driven enough volume to them.
All right. I'm going to change things up a little bit here. Okay. So you're not Michelle, CEO of NEI. Okay. You just took a job at a corporate client, and you have to do an RFP. How are you going about your searching for an RMC, and how are you going to find the right one? Like just from a process standpoint.
From a process standpoint, probably we'll be using the internet to look at, who's out there. What are those Google ratings? What are they saying? What are the other types of ratings out there? The triple survey gives a great lens into all the topics that are important to making sure the program can be fully run. I would be chatting with colleagues, reaching out to different connections at peer type companies based upon LinkedIn and other facets within the industry, worldwide ERC connections, and really looking through to see who are others recommending and what can they do. And then striking up a conversation and a relationship with the potential RMCs that I'm going to encounter to decide who's the best fit for that RFP.
So as you go through the courting process, what are maybe 4 things then, or 3 things, we'll say, I like 3. What are 3 things that you would make sure that you hammered out with the RMC before you offered anyone a best and final?
I would want to make sure what is their service philosophy.
Explain that a little bit more.
Service philosophy, how are they seeing the approach to working with my employee who is relocating? What is their approach towards assigning the support staff that will help them? Or will there not be any support staff? Will it just be the computer? 2, what does the technology look like to be supporting that service philosophy? And then 3 is probably, what is the ballpark ranges of pricing? Knowing that before you go in just kind of would help streamline the process.
Okay, so now you're in the best and finals. What are you using? So, every company that you have invited to best and finals has had great responses to those 3 questions. What are you asking them in the best and final to really help you decide who you're going to go with? And are you going to share your criteria?
Oh, sure. I'll share my criteria. I would ask that the team that's going to be assigned and supporting the account, should they win the business, be included. And then have model scenarios to ask, how would these things be handled throughout the move, to hear from the individuals directly involved on who's going to be assigned as to how they would handle it. And just see and feel that also, how would, if I had questions throughout the process as a client stakeholder, how would that work? Having a payroll contact there and asking, how would this work? So making sure that you really feel kind of what is a day in the life? And do you have that good cultural connection and a good personality fit between the proposed team and then myself and the stakeholders that'll be involved in the day-to-day after the provider is selected?
Okay, so you get down to 2 providers and you really like one, but procurement is saying no. What are you saying to that procurement agent?
Zac, we're going to have a spreadsheet at that point, and you're going to have to, between understanding the numbers, but if one is higher, looking at, are there some offsets? What is going to save the internal team time and labor that they can do? So maybe the pricing is a little bit higher, but with that, they're not going to have to manually do something within the system. They're not going to have to do follow-ups on a certain piece. Does the company handle all the repayments? And then look at that and really make sure you're comparing apples and apples with the pricing, because a lot of times there can be a lot of a la carte pricing. It may look bundled, but may not be fully bundled. Really making sure, is there a solid comparison within the pricing? And then what is the soft costs that are going to impact you in time and labor that will add up in hard dollars?
Does it ever come down to like gut? Like, I know that, there's who you're talking with, there's like a trust factor. Like, I really feel like this person, if things were not going right, I could call them and we can get this straightened out. That's hard to put on a spreadsheet.
That is. But generally with that, you'll start to see that in the answers and the ratings that you came through in working through that, because responsiveness or ability to understand the concern, and how do you work through concerns, those can be elements that you can give ratings to so that you can rank those factors out that, it may be supporting your gut instinct. But I imagine that as you looked at the criteria, that scores would shake out on a scorecard if you really put down what you're seeking in a provider. That may be validated.
I could have guessed that you would have found a way to rate a gut feeling. All right, so there's this quote that I really like. And, we're an industry built on talent. We exist because people value talent wherever it is. And this quote is from Alex Hormozzi. It says, "Being cheap with talent is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make." What are your thoughts to that? And have you noticed any sort of trends or changes in the industry that really make you think of this quote?
I've seen this quote. It's so true in so many things. I've seen where benefits packages maybe don't cover a unique situation for an employee, and that employee is so upset that their employer wouldn't allow us to cover a $5,000 expense, maybe something related to a fee for something or something that was a deposit on something that they needed help with, and they carried that as somewhat of a grudge throughout the move. And then in less than 6 months, we're getting the call to say this employee is no longer at the company and they need a repayment agreement processed. Now, oftentimes it may not just be that one piece, but then it's something else, something else, something else. And it does kind of come to light sometimes that was something in their mind that started in that front end of the move where they didn't get something. Does that exception then end up staying with them through the life of the company and they don't get over that? It snowballs. Yeah. And there can be that. Sometimes you see that they just weren't the right match for the culture, but sometimes making sure that we can help our clients with that candidate assessment, really making sure that their candidates have a really good understanding and a match for where they're going to be going, or in the case of an assignment, are they a good candidate to go on assignment? They're new to your company. If you're going to send them on assignment right away, do you have all the right assessments to do to see, is this going to be a match? And so sometimes spending a little bit of upfront money to kind of go through those assessments are dollars well spent, so that that this is going to be the best shot of success for this employees all the way through.
If you can actually get down in your business to those roles that are, mission critical,
absolutely,
it's spare no expense for the right person because of the outsized returns that person can bring. I think, one of the problems is, do you know those positions where they're at, and do you have a firm grasp on, this is the person that we need to go full bore with,
Absolutely. And we help a lot of our clients with that as well, as to sometimes we help with special policies for target groups. And it's the critical talent of their engineers, because they're having issues with hiring and retaining engineers to certain locations. So maybe it's developing a very specific policy where you can be very cost efficient, but yet tailor to what their specific needs are there. That might be very different than what a mid-level manager needs as they're moving to many different locations throughout their different plant locations. And that's going to vary then as well for the critical talent at an executive level. So that a lot of times we can help a client hone in on what are those talent needs at the different levels, and then still making sure is there consistency with policies among groups of employees so it doesn't become like a free-for-all by exception, whatever people needs, because that gets out. We can help manage that into the appropriate populations.
Nice. So, what would you like to leave the audience with, global mobility managers, if you could leave them with one lesson that NEI has learned over the last 40 years?
Over the last 40 years, I think there's the opportunity that relocation is going to evolve. The compliance issues, whether it's the tax, the immigration, the different components that go along with it, that there's always going to be the need for a strong partnership. The partnership is key between companies that are moving people, their RMC, and their service partners, and maintaining a positive relationship and working through will really help make sure that everyone is working together. Our employees love our clients. They really want to make sure they succeed. They want to make sure all of their employees succeed. And so with that, it's great to see the synergies that we get from working together and really helping make sure that our clients are achieving all of their goals in the talent space and as it relates to mobility. And that really helps us by challenging us to always want to stay out in front. And how can we help them improve upon their policies and continue to deliver service that exceeds their expectations?
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming onto the podcast. You've been great. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to learn some new things about you.
Thanks, Zac, and we'll have to fit in a few more questions for you next time.
That sounds good. That was another episode of Relocation Leader. Please join us back in 2 weeks, and we hope you have a good day.
This has been Relocation Leader, the podcast where we help advanced professionals in the world of global mobility. Listen back here every 2 weeks for a new episode on NEIReload.com or on your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next time.